Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FootPrints Administrators Ideas, Tricks, and Hacks webinars, session one. So hopefully everyone can see my screen and hear me. And if you guys can't, well, I'm sorry, and we'll have a recording for you guys after the fact. So this is our first recording today, our first session, something I've actually been wanting to do for a while, and we finally got it going here. So quick overview, we're going to go through sort of the introduction of what this series is about, and then each session, this session, session two, if you guys have registered for it and beyond, we're kind of going to follow a theme where we go through some ideas, highlights, and then go through various topics that either going to come out from a list of topics that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, or anything that's going to be community driven. At the end of this webinar, you guys will receive a survey. You can kind of grade us, and at the same time, if there's any topics you guys would like us to talk about on future sessions, feel free to chime in. We definitely want this to be something that's going to be beneficial and informational to all of you. All right, bottom right-hand corner there, there's a mugshot of me. There's also my email down there. So if you guys have any questions or any topics you'd like to talk about or whatnot, and you either don't get the survey, don't get the chance, feel free to email me at that address, and we can get a conversation going. Okay, so series introduction. So like I mentioned, and kind of was in the initial email rollout, this is something we've just started, something I've been thinking about doing for several years now, and finally decided to get it going. We're planning on doing this once a month, every month, first, second Wednesday of the month type of deal. Depending on interest, that may stay that way, that may bump up maybe to twice a month or whatnot. We'll reevaluate and adjust as the demand dictates. We're planning for 30 to 45 minutes per webinar. So each webinar invite will be 45 minutes. My goal is to kind of have you guys out of here at the 30 to 40 minute mark. This is going to be intended for anyone who administrates a FootPrints instance, whether you're the actual administrator or just the guy who's inherited the job, or any power users as well. So, if you have anyone else at your organizations that you feel would benefit from the topics that we discuss, feel absolutely free to send them an invite to have them join in. So like I mentioned, the first part of these sessions would be going over some product ideas. So I will be showcasing 5 ideas today. Now, what those ideas are, in case anyone is not familiar with, those are they're called ideas. They're essentially feature requests on the BMC communities page. So we'll be looking at 5 of those today. I'll be providing the URLs as well. So if these are feature requests that you would like to either have more information on or upvote, you'll be able to do so after the webinar. And then afterwards, we go into some tips and tricks. So for today, things talking about the global column, talking about time-based business rules, and then maybe diving into some more advanced or custom logic. So for example, today to get us started, we're going to do a high-level overview of the database, which then segues into session 2 and future sessions where we're going to talk a little bit more about either the database, and that could be in context of just understanding what the backend is, understanding it for the purpose of third-party reporting, or if we want to get into a little bit more custom type logic like SQL triggers, things of that nature. In today's session, I do not really have a Q&A really kind of scheduled for this, but we do have both the chat and the Q&A features there. So if there's anything burning that you guys want to ask, feel free to type it in there. If we have some time towards the end, I can talk to some of those, or if not, I can just kind of get back to you guys via email. So this session is presented by me, Nick Room. I'm a consultant here at RGR Innovations. I've been working with RGR since 2010 in pretty much exclusively the ITSM world and pretty much exclusively the BMC ecosystem. So I started off in the Service Desk Express world, SDE or Magic might have been known. And I started off in the support team and worked my way up to consultant, then became one of the first consultants certified on the Remedy Force product in 2010. So I think within 6 months of joining the company. And when BMC acquired Numera Software in 2012, was one of the first consultants to be certified on the, at the time, new FootPrints 12 offering that they were working on. RGR itself, founded in 2004, mostly from consultants and managers from another company. So very long history of working with BMC, some of which dates back to the mid 90s. So we've been around for a while, and hopefully going to be around for quite a while left. We primarily specialize ITSM, ITAM, CLM, contract lifecycle management, and then we do have some encryption security resources as well, things like PKI, SSL search, HSMs, things of that nature. And then we, of course, offer some services both for implementation, initial implementation, ongoing configuration, support, L1 support, and managed or administrative services. So things like either supplementary administrative assistance to your environment or just completely taking over that administration. So with all of that off the bat here, I'm going to dive right into sort of our first topic here, which is going to be the ideas highlight. So let me switch over to a different window over here. All right, so in terms of ideas highlight, like I mentioned, every session I'd like to talk about 4, 5, 6 different feature requests, ideas, community ideas that either hold a special place in my heart or something that we're seeing an uptick with our clients or the community as whole sort of asking about. So I've got 5 of them here for you. And like I said, I will be sharing those URLs for you guys after the fact if you want. Maybe I'll take a quick backtrack actually here. I'm going to go a little off script here. If I just go to BMC communities as a whole, really wish that link actually worked. Let me do this. Duplicate tab. There we go. Okay, so for you guys that might not be familiar with what community is, so BMC community is essentially BMC's user group for their various products. So this is the community group for FootPrints. They have one for all of their products. So maybe the first thing I'll do here is I'll throw this into the chat. I believe I can do this. We'll give it a shot, everyone. Yep. All right. So first thing I'm going to do here in the chat, the URL to the FootPrints community. So if you guys were not already aware of this or not already signed up, definitely recommend you guys signing up to this community. Gives you the ability to chat with other organizations using FootPrints. Gives you also the ability to vote on those ideas, which are the feature requests. Now, when I'm not a BMC employee. I do not represent BMC. BMC does leverage ideas in terms of feature requests for FootPrints. It is not their only source of information, but it is a source. And it is the only one that is community driven. So when I'm going to be talking about those ideas, they're going to be on this page here. So the first one, and I'll give you guys the links right away. The first one that I like is pretty much the highest voted feature request out there. It is the ability to set permissions based on the value of a dropdown. So think of like, hey, I want the resolution field to be optional, except when the status is closed. Then I want that field to become required. So you may or may not know, something like that is not currently possible in FootPrints. There are some workarounds to get us there, but the feature as a whole is not available yet. So this is the feature request for that. So if you haven't voted on it already, what you can do is when you go to the BMC website, you do have to sign up, create an account. once you sign up and you have your account, you're able to then vote on that feature request. Now, that vote in of itself honestly does not do much, but it's one of those once many people vote on something, right? The squeaky oil type of scenario here. So if this is something that you believe you would like to have, absolutely go ahead and vote on this feature. Now, in the meantime, I did mention there are some workarounds available for this particular idea. So the most common one is field dependencies, right? So if you want that resolution field to be required when you close the ticket, right now what we do is we go to field dependencies, we say status, field dependency child, resolution. That means the child field, the resolution field, does not show up on the form until the status hits closed, at which point then it's on the form and required. The most common workaround, you guys probably have that configured in your systems. A second workaround to this, less common, a lot more involved, is essentially creating duplicate fields. So you would have resolution optional, resolution required, and then you do combinations of on-screen rules and after save rules to show one field, hide the other, and copy data from one to the next. And that gives you the illusion of being able to set the permission of a field based on some criteria, whatever you define in your business rule, but by having duplicate fields. The next feature request I'll go over is my personal favorite, database query field type, aka SDE's calculated field. So I don't know if there's anyone in the house today that used to use BMC's Service Desk Express product. It was BMC's mid-market product before they acquired Numera in 2012, and then they end-of-lifed SDE in favor of FootPrints. SDE had a really neat field type called a calculated field. And essentially what that allowed you to do is write some SQL query and then have that as your field. So as a quick example, I'm just going to switch gears over here to my FootPrints VM, which is hiding over here. So what it would allow you to do is, let's say, I got something real simple here, right? Select 2 plus 2. If I run this, it gives me 4. And so I could go, let's pretend that feature existed. I could go into FootPrints environments, or actually, sorry, an SDE environment, I suppose. I could create a new field and say, field type, calculated field. And then it would say, enter your SQL. I would do select 2 plus 2. And what that would do is when I open up a record, that field would display the output of that select statement. Something incredibly powerful, a little bit risky potentially. And of course, you do have to know some SQL queries, but to be quite frank, I believe anyone administrating one of these products should know at least the basics of SQL. So this really allowed you to do some very powerful things. And I kind of noted that in the feature request itself. So, you guys can go through, and I've linked to other feature requests where, doing this could allow you to do that. So one of the common feature requests was, hey, I want to be able to calculate the difference between 2 date fields. So let's say, for example, change management. I have a start date and an end date. And I then want to know what is the delta between those two. And there were some discussions on that, including on that feature request as, okay, well, do you want that in hours? Do you want that in decimal hours? Do you want that in minutes, et cetera? How do you want that displayed? And with something like this, you don't even have to worry about that because, well, I shouldn't say you. BMC doesn't have to worry about that. They just have to give you the feature. You write the SQL the way you want it. So if you wanted to display in minutes or in seconds or in hours or in days, you would just write up the SQL yourself. Very similar to, I don't know if you guys are using Service Analytics. If I go back to my VM over here into Service Analytics. So in Service Analytics, you have the ability to create formulas. Now, formulas are essentially a new column in the report that don't link back to a field that exists in your environment. And those formulas are SQL functions. So if you're already familiar with, how to use these, then it's sort of the same principle, except being able to do it on the ticket itself. So if I do want to calculate the difference between that open date and the close date, or a plethora of other scenarios, it allows you to do that. So this is my personal favorite for all the existing feature requests. Next one up is this one here: redesign relationships, link controls. This was a feature request I created a while ago, apparently 8 years ago. And this was just encompassing a lot of the other existing feature requests around link controls. Now, some of this stuff is out of date because, of course, in the last 8 years, various improvements have been brought out. But there's still some in here that are quite valuable. So while this parent feature request, feel free to absolutely vote on it, but it's mostly there as a collection, almost like categorizing the feature request. So things like, maybe having the link controls use less space. So if you've ever configured a form before and you have to throw in some link controls, you know that you're very limited into how you can manipulate those link controls, right? You can't make them use only one column. They have to use the entire row. You can't really make them small, or you can't really remove some of the buttons, things like that. So there's a lot of features in there for that one. The one I kind of believe is probably my number one ask, and the number one ask I tend to hear a lot is being able to have additional relationship types. So you may or may not know the relationship types that are available to us. And if I switch back to my demo environment here, if I add in a new relationship, this list over here is static. We cannot manipulate this list, can't add to it, remove to it, rename. And so you're kind of stuck using what's there. Now, for the most part, that's okay, especially if we're talking about within the ITSM world. However, if you want to go outside of the ITSM world, you have to, maybe leverage some of these generic ones. Or the most common ask I have is ticket to contact. I want to track 2 contacts on my ticket. I want to track the submitter, and I want to track the person that's being impacted. Right now, unless you want to use free text fields or something like that, you're kind of limited to having 2 people in the link control. But then you can't really determine who's who. Maybe in a later session, I will talk about a little bit of a hack to get around that. It's not pretty, but at least it works. But having the ability to create our own relationship types would be hugely beneficial. And that's the, sort of the number one ask on this relationship type here, on this feature request, sorry. Next one, similar concept, improvements to the UI. So again, some of you guys may have experienced some of this. There's a lot of little, I'm going to call it intricacies to the UI, where you kind of just look at it and you scratch your head and you're saying, like, who came up with this, right? So a lot of that is kind of around these improvements. Some of them are extremely trivial. My 2 personal favorites are, for example, if I go into a container, I can apply a template file over here. But then I can come over here and do the same thing. Why do I have 2 buttons? Or if I want to update a user, add a user to some more containers. Well, this only shows me 3 at a time. And if you have a lot of containers, that's a long list. Or imports, if you have failed imports. This one's one of my personal favorites. Where is my problem? Oh, my problem one didn't fail today. So if you're, I'll be able to show you this, but of course it, completed successfully. I was hoping for some errors here. If you have any errors, you have to come look over here. Well, this here will only show you 2 rows at a time, 5 rows per page. So if you have 100 failures, 500 failures, that's a lot of scrolling up and down and going to the next pages. So definitely a lot of improvements that can be done to the UI on that. So I'd like to highlight this one. Again, kind of link some individual feature requests that, if any of these seem important or beneficial to you, go ahead and vote. And the last one for today is hiding a section when empty. So you may or may not know that if you have fields in a row and all of those fields are hidden, field dependency or on-screen business rule, the row itself hides. The same is not true for a section. If all of the fields in a section are hidden, the section still shows up. So this is, just a feature request to say, hey, if there are no visible fields in that section, hide it. Makes things cleaner, especially in the context of service requests, HR, employee onboarding. Those types of processes usually benefit from that the most. So that's pretty much all I have now for ideas. Like I said, I will drop those links. Actually, let me do that now. I will drop those links to you guys here in the chat so you'll have them. There's the second one, the third one, fourth one, and last one. Oops. Okay, next up is the global column. So I'm going to minimize that now here, go back to my environment. So some of you guys may have this, some of you guys may have solved this, some of you guys may just kind of ignored it and kind of live with it, right? You log in, you're doing your work, and you have the dreaded subscribe column showing on the far left. And when you look at your saved search and you modify it, there's nothing that says, show me this subscribe column. And if you try to hide it and you log out and you log back in, it just comes back. How do we get rid of it? So I'll show you guys how to get rid of it. The one caveat here, though, is that if you are using global functionality, you have to be careful, because if you're using globals and then you do what I'm going to show you, you've effectively broke globals. So if you do leverage the global functionality within FootPrints, you're just going to have to live with this column, at least in the context of the item or container to which you're using it. So this is very easy to get rid of. Essentially, what you want to do is you want to go to the container role of whatever container role this person is using. So if I go over to my administrator, I go to the agent container role for here, and you're going to see under field permissions the global field. By default, set to edit. If you flip that to no and then save, and of course this is a permission change. In order for permission changes to take effect, you have to log out and log back in. So if I log out as Roy and I'm going to log back in as soon as this saves, which may take a couple seconds here. Permissions tend to be a little bit slow on the save, but that's essentially as easy as that. Now, if you have a view that is showing you multiple items, multiple containers at the same time, you will have to do this trick for all of those items in that view for it to actually go away. So now if I log back in as Roy, you'll see that subscribe column is now gone. Easy as that. Okay, next up, time-based business rules. So there's a little bit to talk about here. So time-based business rules are very unique functionality in terms of what you can do with it, right? Hey, I want this to check once a day, once an hour, etc. You can do a lot with it, and usually time-based business rules will also impact more than one ticket, right? Traditionally, an after save rule or an on-screen rule for that matter, they will only impact one ticket because you're only saving one ticket at a time. However, a time-based business rule has the potential to update dozens, hundreds, or thousands of tickets at a same time, depending on what the criteria of that rule is. So we always say that time-based business rules, you have to be careful with their design, how many you build, when you run them, things like that, because they can impact the performance of your system. Imagine if you've been running FootPrints for 10 years, you've got 5 million tickets in your environment, and you have a time-based business rule that runs, and the criteria is perhaps poorly crafted, and that time-based business rule is trying to update 5 million records. And maybe that time-based business rule runs every hour. So every hour you're trying to update 5 million records. That's going to really slam your system. So you have to be careful with how you design them. Definitely do not limit your usage of them, right? Don't say, hey, I have to avoid creating time-based business rules because they're bad for my environment. don't think that. I've heard some clients, some people talking on communities, and that was kind of the message, is avoid time-based business rules as much as possible. And that really shouldn't be the message to drive home. However, there are some ways that you can plan and improve your usage of time-based rules. So the first thing I'm going to show off here, this is a custom SQL view that we have created as part of the FootPrints Advanced Starter template. You may or may not have heard of that. That'll be a topic for another session. But we have a view out of the box for that gives you a list of all the time-based business rules in your system. So you can see here, I've run the view and it's given me this output here. So in my environment, I can see by container type, by container, by item, each rule that is a time-based business rule and what that schedule is. Time-based business rules run as a cron job. If you're not familiar with what a cron job is, it's basically the scheduler in like a Linux system or other types of environments, similar to, let's say, the Windows task scheduler, right? You go in there, you say, hey, I want this job to execute at X amount, and it will do that. So for example, this one here is a job that runs every 15 minutes. You can go online and find some cron job syntax converters where you basically punch this in and it'll convert it for you. So you've got, even I don't remember offhand exactly what it is. I think the first 0 might be seconds. The second one is minutes. The third one is hours, and then days of weeks, et cetera, et cetera. So this gives you an output of all of your rules so that you can see how many you have, where they're located, and what their jobs are. And one of the things you want to avoid is having all of your jobs running at the same time. So there's two main things here. One is avoid having them running at the same time. So if I pick, let's say I'll go to a follow-up business rule that I have over here in facilities. So note of set follow-up 2. So, oh no, that's an after save rule. Notify, let's try that one. That's also an after save. All right, I'm gonna have to reference my list here. Facilities, set follow-up. Let's go to that one, set follow-up. There we go. All right, so I've got a time-based business rule here. So when I look at this rule here, it's going to run hourly. And that's probably the most common use case, is to have something run hourly, potentially daily. And then I have the option here of configuring how many hours and at what minute interval. So if I want a rule to run every hour and I have multiple of these rules running every hour, it's a good idea to separate them. So have one rule run at the 0 minute mark, have the next rule run at the 2 minute mark, have the next rule run at the 4 minute mark, right? You edit each one of your rules like that and stagger them so that they're not all running at the same time and putting a heavy load on, or potentially heavy load on the system at the same time. That's the first big tip, that you could do with time-based business rules. Now, this only works if you're doing frequencies of hourly, daily, weekly, where you can configure this. If you are using the check every X minutes, this one you got to be a little bit more careful with. For example, I try to avoid stuff. I try to avoid using these ones as much as I can and instead relying on hourly. Depending on your use case, that may or may not be possible. You might say, hey, yeah, I can afford for this rule to only check every hour instead of every 30 minutes. And again, here, I can control exactly at what minute it fires. However, if I'm using the check every X minutes, this is checking every, on the hour clock, right? So that the 5, if I've got this at 5, it's checking at the 0, the 5, the 10, the 15, the 20, etc. Same thing, if I do this one, it's checking at the 30, the 60, the 30, the 60. So you want to make sure you kind of maybe limit this one, unless you know that the criteria is really narrow and you're only impacting, a handful of tickets. So that's my biggest thing with time-based business rules is don't avoid using them, right? Don't think that you have to avoid using them unless absolutely necessary, but do make sure that you plan them in a smart way. So if you're doing daily or hourly, which is typically the most common usage, or at least the most common usage I've seen on these rules, stagger the rules, right? If this particular rule is going to run at the 4-minute mark, I'm going to go to another rule and put it on the 5-minute mark, the 6-minute mark, something like that, right? Stagger them away just to distribute the load. If you have any rules where you're going to be updating a bunch of tickets, like, I don't know, archive my, this rule runs once a month to archive incidents older than a year. Maybe plan to run that rule, not at 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, when in your off peak hours. So at least you help minimize the impact. All right, so that's all I'm going to say on time-based rules for now. So my last topic of the day is a high-level overview of the database. So depending on how you've been trained, you may or may not know anything about the database. So this was something that was a little bit of an opener for me when I first took the BMC training, because when I first took the FootPrints training in probably 2013 or so, a little bit after BMC acquired Numera, and they were getting ready to release the new version of FootPrints. And I went on the 5-day admin course, and we talked all about administrating the front end. And then when it came to, okay, hey, Mr. Trainer, what does the back end look like? And at the time, the answer was, oh, you don't have to worry about that. You don't need to know that as an administrator. And it was an interesting philosophy, and some that I still see to this day. Not necessarily, from BMC, or just, sometimes talking with people on communities or other administrators, and very different from sort of, if I can put it this way, the way I was brought up, right? Good administrator knows his environment inside and out. Now, you don't have to be an expert and know every single table and things like that, but at least have a general idea. And if for nothing more than third-party reporting, it's going to be a topic of our next session. But that's going to be probably the biggest reason why a FootPrints administrator should know. You may be in an organization where you do all your reporting from service analytics or just from the saved searches, or you may be in an organization that does the reporting from an external source. And, your external report writer isn't going to know how to get the data out of the database because he doesn't know where it's stored. And, that's where it kind of falls back on your shoes to know. So quick high-level overview of the database. Before I dive into that, and this is just like a 5-minute crash course here. Before I dive into that, I'm going to go back over here. So I had a 6th tab open here, which is the data model for FootPrints. So again, I'm going to share this URL here with you guys. You will need an account to BMC to log in to access this. Now, this is the data model. Essentially last updated in 12.109, but essentially nothing's really changed since then. The one caveat with this data model, FootPrints, as you may or may not remember, when you first did the install, it's a blank canvas. It's up to you guys to build it the way you see fit. Create your own containers, your own items, your own forms, etc. So it's essentially impossible for BMC to provide a data model for your tickets because they don't know how you built your tickets. There's an asterisk on that, which we'll cover in a second session next month, reviewing the data model that we've created for tickets. But this data model here shows you all of the system tables and how everything is connected. So definitely worth looking at and at least having as a reference. Now, in terms of the database itself, I've expanded it over here. First thing to note is, you'll have FP, SC, DB01, or just FP, FootPrints Service Core, the old name, or just FootPrints, database 01. And, you might not have 01, you might have 02, 03, depending on what you've installed. But that first little bit there, you can completely ignore. It's going to be the same top to bottom in your database. So next up, we're on that second sort of little nibble of information here. So we have AB over here, address book. So your address books, right? If I go over here, address books. Next up, CMDB. And each one of them have a number afterwards. And that's going to be the number of the container based on when they were created. So this is the first address book container, the first CMDB container. As you can see, I only have one of each. If I go down, content repository, going to skip over that one. That's essentially related to ticket attachments. We then have KB for knowledge base. And here's where things start to get a little interesting, because you can see I have 3 knowledge bases. So here I have knowledge base 1, knowledge base 2, knowledge base 3. On another session, I'll kind of show you guys how to determine which one's which, but essentially they're, that's how it's structured. SP for service portfolio. So same thing, I've got 3. So we'll see, actually I've got a little caveat here. I've got 3, however, 2 of them have never been published. They have never been published at all. So until the first time they're published, they will not exist in the database, which is why there's only SP1 over here. Next up, staging tables. These are all related to imports. After that, we have system tables, and this is where that BMC data model will really kind of show you what all of this is. And in later sessions, we'll go through some of the important ones, but the major highlight ones would be things like assignments. Any assignee field anywhere in the system stored in this database table over here. I've got app user. So this is all of my users in FootPrints, whether they are agent users or customer users. Keep going down. So all these system tables again, CFG setting val. This table here is going to be one of the largest tables in your environment, and pretty much everything you do in FootPrints from a configuration standpoint, a field, a business rule, a user, a calendar, an item, a relationship, etc. Pretty much everything touches this table in one form or another. So you can see there's 303,000 rows in this particular environment. And this is mostly it's a FootPrints advanced starter template environment, but it's mostly out of the box with not a whole lot to it. So it's entirely possible for your database to have a lot more in here. A lot of these tables, you can kind of figure out what they are just based on the name, right? Chat for chat, definitions, email notifications, imp for imports, item relationship. So if you want to do, from the database, you want to track what ticket is related to what ticket, item relationship has that for you. Portal, list of your portals. You know what? I'll give you guys a quick freebie over here. This is something I do quite often in our environment. So I'm logged in as a system administrator right now. And if I were to log out and log back in again, you may notice 2 things here that may be different from your environment. So number 1, I start on the administration console instead of the home console. So, usually you log in as your system admin, you're on the home console, you then have to click the administration console, which you're pretty much going to do every time you log in as your admin. And I've also changed the icon and the colors, right? The theme. However, if I go and edit, and actually I've also even renamed it from default system portal. But if I go into it, it's locked. Can't edit it. Well, the trick on this, now I'm going to show you guys this, but the caveat is don't use this unless you really know what you're doing. Email me first if you guys want to use this trick, because you can get into some trouble with this one. But essentially, in the portals table, there is a column for is system, and you'll see this one is flagged as a 1, and everything else is flagged as a 0. So if you set that 1 to a 0, you're now able to edit the portal. Don't even have to restart Tomcat or anything. You just update this, and away you go, right? So I can even just do that real quick here. So I edit that from a true to a false, go down, come back in here. You saw, I couldn't edit it. Everything is grayed out. And now if I go back in, voila, I can make some changes. The very important thing here, though, is once you're done with your changes, you have to set that back to true. And the reason for that, and only have one portal with this on true. And the reason for that is the way BMC has their SQL scripts during an upgrade, it specifically checks for one row in here with a true. And if there is no rows with a true or multiple rows with a true, your upgrade will fail. So like I said, if you want to use this little trick here, send me an email. We'll talk a little bit more about it. I don't want you guys getting in trouble. All right, where was I? So portals, keep going down over here. RPT report, schedules, saved searches, team list, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, later on, we'll go into maybe a little bit more of a deep dive, but essentially anything to do with configuration or high level ticket data like the assignees is in here. Below that, we then get into WS for workspaces. So now all of my workspace information is in here. So I can see workspace 1 incident, workspace 1 problem, workspace 1 service request, et cetera, et cetera. So if you know, hey, I want to report on my incidents using a third-party tool, this is going to be the first table you start with. Of course, you will have to do some joins to some other tables. You know, for example, I'll have to join to that assignment table way up here to get my assignee informations. I then have to join that table to my users to actually get something meaningful, so on and so forth. So very quick high-level overview of the database on that. Database design is part of what we teach during our administrator courses. So if there's any of my clients out there, I think I see a few of you guys on the list, you know, probably bringing back some maybe good or not so good memories of learning the database. But I think that will be it for today. I'm seeing here, I'm at my 2-minute mark to what I had promised for you guys. So I'm going to end it here for today. Hopefully you guys have found this session enjoyable, informative. We have our next session, session 2, on December 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern as well. The registration link was already passed out to you guys, you know, whether you saw it from an email blast that we sent or from the BMC communities. Definitely appreciate you guys coming here today, and look forward to seeing you guys on the next session. So that's all I have for now. So we'll end the session here shortly, and I believe we'll be sending out a survey to gather some feedback. I don't know, is that something that instantly happens or in the next day or so, but please watch out for that, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.